Hello, all you ghosts and goblins out there. I'm Ashton,
I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sean.
and we are the Night Scholars, exploring the mystifying world of cryptids, ghosts, ghouls, and all things supernatural. The night, the horseman comes, and tonight he comes for you. Murder! Cried he. Well, that accounts for her not speaking. Having uttered these words, Larry himself became dumb with fear and astonishment. His blood seemed to turn to ice, a dizziness came over him, and staggering like a drunken man, he rolled against the broken window of the ruin, horrified at the conviction that he had actually held a Dullahan in his embrace. When he recovered to something like a feeling of consciousness, he slowly opened his eyes, and then indeed a scene of wonder burst upon him. In the midst of the ruins stood an old wheel of torture, ornamented with heads, like court gowl, when the heads of Murdy Sullivan and other gentlemen were stuck upon it. This was plainly visible in the strange light which spread itself around. It was fearful to behold. But Leary could not choose but look, for his limbs were powerless for the wonder and the fear. Useless as it was, he would have called for help, but his tongue cleaved to the roof of his mouth, and not one word could he say. In short, there was Larry gazing through a shattered window of the old church, with eyes bleared and almost starting from their sockets. His breast rested on the thickness of the wall, over which one side his head and outstretched neck projected, and on the other, although one toe touched the ground, it derived no support from thence. Terror, as it were, kept him balanced. Strange noises assailed his ears, until at last they tingled painfully to the sharp clatter of little bells which kept up a continued ding, ding, ding. Marrowless bones rattled and clanked, and the deep and solemn sound of a great bell came booming on the night wind. 'Twas a spectre rung that bell when it swung, swing, swang, and the chain it squeaked, and the pulley creaked, swing, swang, and with every roll of the deep death toll, ding dong, the hollow vault rang and the clapper went bang, ding dong. It was strange music to dance by, nevertheless moving to it. Round and round the wheel set with skulls were well-dressed ladies and gentlemen, and soldiers and sailors, and priests and publicans, and jockeys and jinnies, but all without their heads. Some poor skeletons whose bleached bones were ill covered by moth-eaten paws, and who were not admitted into the ring, amused themselves by bowling their brainless noddles at one another, which seemed to enjoy the sport beyond measure. Larry did not know what to think. His brains were all in a mist, and losing the balance which he had so long maintained, he fell head foremost into the midst of the company of the Dullahans. So that's a charming story introduction to what we will be talking about tonight.
Yeah.
You remember how I told you last week, when we recorded at the Black Eyed Children, that I hated those things? I think I might hate these things more.
Really?
Nice.
Yeah, there's just something unsettling about them.
They
Can't
don't
quite
have
get
a
my head
head.
around it.
So, yeah.
Yeah, Andrew, you beat me to it.
Is it
Yeah,
because we were all introduced to the concept of the Headless Horseman through the Disney movie at an early age?
that would probably do it with the flaming skull and the black cape.
No, wait.
Ichabod and Mr. Crane, or no, Mr.
Yeah,
Toad.
which one of you had the very controversial take that Ichabod deserved it? Was it you, Sean? Because I have
He did
fighting words for
deserve it.
you.
Go, bring it on. Ichabod Crane had it coming.
He was but a humble little like professor who the girl genuinely loved, and then he's beaten out by some Gaston-esque douchebag.
That's normally how it goes, isn't it?
He should have been the bigger man then. And
He was scrawny twink, and he did his best.
I don't, I don't think anybody in the history of ever has described Ichabod as a scrawny twink until this moment in history.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what he was, though. Like the other guy was like champion polo player, and Ichabod Crane is just skinny and barely eats food.
I mean, you're not wrong here. That's why he had it coming. He wasn't strong enough to live in that world at that time. Nowadays, he'd do fine.
Would he though?
No, he'd probably still get his head knocked off by a pumpkin.
All right, and like nowadays, the richer you are, the more you can get away with it. So
That
So
is true.
money overall.
yes. So tonight, we are talking about the Irish, and I guess it also has some Scottish origins. The Dullahan, and this creature very much did inspire the story of the Headless Horseman that we were just talking about. And the characteristics of the Dullahan, uh, they are known for obviously being headless. Sometimes, most of the time, their head is kept near them. It's either floating close to their bodies, tucked under their arms, or it is inside of their pockets. And in several of
Yeah.
the stories, the horse is also headless, and it's pretty evident that when he wrote the Legend of Sleepy Hollow is actually a town in New York, and he had Scottish and Irish heritage. He traveled around Europe. He had a Scottish nanny, and it is pretty obvious that he would have actually heard of this. I guess it would be classified as a cryptid, a fae, so on, what have you. It's a also a harbinger of death, like the banshee, and he kind of combined elements of this along with the in his story he called it the galloping hessian, and the hessian were real German soldiers that were hired by the British during the American Revolution, who were known as being rather violent and ruthless. And so like the exact quote from that is, it is said by some to be the ghost of a Hessian trooper whose head had been carried away by a cannonball in some nameless battle during the Revolutionary War. And it's thought that he added those elements to kind of just make it more scary for Americans who were his audience at the time.
Mhm. That makes sense. Now, I don't know about y'all, but the earliest I was able to trace this thing was to the 1800s. There was a couple. I couldn't verify anything from the 1700s, but I know I found a couple collections of Irish fairy tales that mentioned it in the 1800s. I know Dickinson, and it appeared in one of her poems, I believe, because I could not wait for death. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah, I also have Fairy Legends and Traditions of the South of Ireland by Thomas Crofton, and Fairy and Folk Tales of the Irish Peasantry, edited by W.B. Yeats. Although the first account that I was able to find was in 1802 in a book by Charles Valency entitled Prospectus of a Dictionary of the Language of the Aracoti, or Ancient compared with the language of the Kuti, or Ancient Persians, with the Hindustani, the Arabic, and the Chaldean languages. And it was just like a really brief reference where he compared the Irish Dullahan with the Arabic demon Wullahan. And this depiction is a lot different than any other depiction that I was able to find otherwise, where it actually said that it is a rather terrible bugbear that drags a heavy chain through the villages and along the roads. And I thought that the bugbear was interesting because the only other time that I've heard bugbear is in D&D campaigns.
Dang.
I didn't see a reference to a bugbear. I did see it described as the hobgoblin a couple times, which is just a smaller version of the bugbear.
Was it? Was it Clark?
Interesting.
So was it Clark?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't Clark. Nor was it
For
Shia
you
LaBeouf.
For you audience members out there, we had a very failed campaign that Sean was running where Andrew's character and another character who you might recognize from the doppelganger episode of this podcast, or his brother, um, both were clerics who were just converting every single person, and Sean ran out of names for little goblins, and all of them became Shia LaBeouf.
I don't remember doing a doppelganger episode. When did we do that? But yes, all the goblins
no,
were
never
Shia
mind.
LaBeouf.
We never did a doppelganger episode. You guys don't need to know anything about that. Anyways,
This derailed.
my name is Ashton, and it has always been Ashton, and I have always been Ashton. Oh, speaking of things of unknown origin, so one of the stories that or the story that I read from earlier was a story called The Good Woman from Croker's Fairy Legends.
Mhm.
And I've actually heard this quote before, but I didn't know where it was from. So I think that it's actually interesting that it ties in with the Dullahans. And but this I know, that a woman without a head may well be called a good woman because she has no tongue.
Sounds about right.
I mean, that's pretty based, you know?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have heard that before, but I've heard it before as a woman, and I'm just like, I hate this. And now that I know where it's from, I'm just like, it's actually a cool story because it's like of a man who gives a ride to this woman, and like she doesn't say anything, like she has like a cloak over her head, so like it's not like, or what would be a head, so it's not like suspicious. And he ends up dismounting to fix one of his shoes, and she like abruptly gets off and like runs towards the Kilnaslattery church, and he searches for her like expecting a kiss for this favor, which gross. And then like the little like segment that I read, like he ends up finding out that she doesn't have a head, and like leads him to like a whole like bunch of people who don't have one, and he's just like disturbed by the fact that he had held this woman who didn't have a head. And he goes back to his wife and is just like, oh, well, yes, I might have picked up a woman and I might have expected a kiss, but that's not the point. The point is that I ran into a Dullahan.
No, by the way, I've never heard that saying.
Oh, well, good.
Makes sense, though.
I did always hear children are to be seen, not heard. I don't know what that's from, though.
Yeah, I mean, watch it be from another cryptid. It's this one I
I'm
have heard.
surprised it
It's
wasn't.
from a
I'm
cryptid.
surprised it wasn't the damn black-eyed children that had it come up.
Krampus?
Krampus.
Krampus is a little weirdo. Yeah, you should definitely go check out our episode on Krampus. We had a lot of fun with that one. Because he is a little weirdo.
Yep, all three of us were definitely there. It was the three of us.
It was, right?
As far as I remember.
I don't know. It's been a long time since we did that episode.
Actually, are you sure you're okay? Hey, you keep making references to things that didn't happen.
Oh, I'm just drinking.
Yeah, that's fair.
Oh.
Just keep it away from the laptop.
Okay, so, I guess before we go too much further into this, like, I think a lot of us do know tales of the Headless Horseman, both from the Disney rendition and from the kind of bastardization of it from Sleepy Hollow. But there are some like key characteristics of the Dullahan that I did kind of want to go into, and you guys can tell me if you guys found more. But so one thing that I thought was interesting is that they're seen more as a harbinger. Like if you see one, either you or someone you love will die or suffer in some terrible eyeless way. And there are actually even stories of them in the company of banshees. They can be either male. Yeah. So they can be either male or female. It doesn't matter. Like we know of the Headless Horseman, but that could be gender neutral. It always travels by horse. It is headless. They often travel in packs, and it is seen as a personification of death. And although it does not kill you, they are known to whip out your eyes.
I did see several references. It's to anyone who looks upon it would lose their eyesight. Whether it would gouge them out or it would just throw blood in your eyes and blind you.
Yeah,
It uses a whip on their eyes?
yeah,
Sounds
yeah,
pretty
they have a
awful.
whip that they carry around with them, and, like, in some stories, I think which one is it? It's the Harvest Dinner, the story of the Harvest
Yeah,
Dinner. In some tales of it, the whip is actually made out of a human spine,
I do
I
remember,
did see the human
yes.
spine. I do remember the human spine. It was weird.
which is creepy, and I love it.
So all I'm hearing is that Ash is going to use a human spine, and in her villain era. That's what I'm hearing.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, look, if I can somehow team up with Chapel Roan and we do like some sort of music video of me using a spine used with or a whip made from a human spine, that would be like dream come true.
I mean, mine's crooked enough; it could make a good whip.
I mean, so is that kind of like where people make the reference to like someone having their Joker era? Would it just be Ashton's Dullahan era?
Ah, yes, yes, it would. I could,
Apparently. I mean, with my like poor face memory issues, people not having his head, I'm like kind of used to that anyways.
Mm.
so, but here's the catch, Andrew. So, is she good at lockpicking and crossing barriers? Because as I did see multiple references to this thing cannot be kept out from anywhere it wants to be. It'll it'll break through locks. It'll just cross barriers,
I mean,
and
For legal
for legal purposes, is Ashton is not a Dullahan.
No, for legal purposes, I can neither confirm nor deny if I'm good at lockpicking.
so here's the thing. There's also another route you're not seeing here, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
They have a horse. Do you know how much a horse weighs and how hard it can kick?
Yes,
Easily
yes,
enough
I
to
do.
bring down a door.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Maybe it doesn't kick. Maybe they just ride at full speed into the door and break through it. I don't know.
she she needs to have a fog machine though to really get the full effect
Yeah.
of the spookiness.
Look, again, I this is my official petition to get me to do a music video at Chapel Roan where all of this is happening.
Watch her listen to our podcast.
One could dream.
Right now,
All right. So in order to get this thing to appear, I have to either or my victims either have to succumb to lustful thoughts or have been drinking too heavily. So I think that that's okay. Like I think that we're gonna be making pretty good strides towards this.
So,
see, there's another reason Ichabod Crane had it coming. He was a drunk. Can't summon this
so,
thing unless you're a drunk.
yeah. So, for clarification, what does it mean to succumb to lustful thoughts?
Don't know. I mean,
That,
this was forever ago, so it could have just been somebody thinking about an ankle a little bit too strongly.
Hmm.
that feels very woman in white.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We need to do an
Could
episode
be.
on them at some point.
They are
We'll get
creepy.
We
there.
do reference them most every episode, them and the Mothman.
Yeah. Most
Well,
episodes
that's just
coming eventually. There was a lot of stuff that happened, like in that like 10-month period,
it's a really, really creepy 10 months.
and it's all kind of connected. I don't know.
It's not. It's gonna be like a 2 or 3 part episode once we finally get to it.
Yeah, again, and the first episode is just going to be Andrew saying, I love the Mothman. The Mothman is the best cryptid for like 40
Yes,
minutes.
I'm planning on getting a Mothman tattoo.
Imagine thinking the Mothman is actually an interesting cryptid.
Imagine.
I mean, it's more
Imagine
interesting
making
than
it
the
your entire
Loch Ness monster.
personality. Hey, in my defense, it's Iowa is boring, so it makes sense it has a boring cryptid.
That is fair. It's just kind of flat corn.
Yeah. Why do you think the
Yeah.
original Children of the Corn took place there? 'Cause that's more terrifying than the Loch Ridge Monster.
Like, I mean, it could just be that I lived in Kansas, but for me, like, Kansas is more terrifying even though it's flat with corn than Iowa.
Yeah. People from Iowa seem to be really nice though too.
Yeah, and
Eh,
Iowa is just so tiny. You kill off one person, that's like 1/10 of the population.
Mm.
I don't know. Somebody couldn't be bothered to come to Iowa.
That was because I was too busy trying to enter my Dullahan era. Sorry, the old Ashley can't come to the phone right now. She's trying to enter a Dullahan era. Anyways, so did you guys see like the history for like why the headless people and why the headless horses and like the historical connection?
Mm-mm.
No.
Oh. So basically, there is a whole history of the headless corpse just kind of already being a thing. There are many Irish Catholic stories and paintings that depict martyred saints walking around carrying their heads as a symbol of how they were executed. And even prior to the introduction of Catholicism in the 4th century, early Celts would take and preserve the heads of their slain enemies to dehumanize them, because basically the spirit was seen as being held inside of the head. So if you rip off the head, you also rip off the spirit. And of course, like nowadays, it's pretty common in pop culture to reference back to the time of the Tudor rule, where the British government offered head money to anyone who could present the head of a known rebel to the crown. And it was also seen as a major insult for the horses, to bury a person alongside with a horse. So you would see like a
That makes
lot of
sense.
times like the horses buried with the humans, like both beheaded.
It's pretty messed up.
A little bit, not as messed up as, so Italy had like all of their like mafia wars, and like it really wasn't that long ago. And I had a teacher in college. She grew up in Sicily, and they were very used to kind of like seeing the warfare. And she told her class a story on the very first day about how she was on a field trip, and they ended up just seeing like the head of like a significant like political figure just like in the crook of like a statue fountain, and how like nobody even like blinked an eye because they were so used to it. So this concept's just kind of been around a while, though I don't know if I would see so many beheaded people. I don't even know if I would see the French taking up a afterlife and running around taunting people.
So do we care about the French?
I know your opinions of the French, Sean.
Good. Uh, let us. Did you find any reason why it was an insult to the horse to have a person buried next to it, other than the fact that people suck?
I did not. Although I always feel so bad for the horses
Yeah,
in like
horses
movies.
don't
Like
deserve
when
that.
they don't, like you watch like Lord of the Rings or Napoleon, and probably other war films that I don't watch, and it's just like, but the horses. Or what was it? The Ring? The Ring unnecessarily killed a horse in it.
I haven't watched The
Mm.
Ring.
I will never watch that movie again. No,
Mhm.
once was enough. I've taken care of horses, as briefly
Yeah.
before. They're great creatures, and they will fuck you up.
So when I was a kid, it wasn't our closest neighbor, but our second closest neighbor had horses, so she let us ride.
Mhm.
It was a pretty good time. Do be careful though if you ever ride horses. My sister fell off one and almost accidentally stepped on.
Yeah. Horses do weigh a lot more than us.
Oh yeah.
Especially you, since you are so tiny.
Um, I don't know if this is accurate. I don't mind. I do have a fun story about one encounter with the Headless Horseman. It's a fictional tale, but it's of this man named Charlie Colnane, who he was riding out one night and he saw the disembodied head of a horse and noticed that the rider was also headless with a disgusting head under its right arms. And unlike a normal looking human head, it looked like a large cream cheese hung around with black puddings. No speck of color enlivened the ashy paleness of the depressed features. The skin lay stretched over the unearthly surface, almost like the parchment head of a drum. Two fiery eyes of prodigious circumference with a strange and irregular motion flashed like meteors upon Charlie, and a mouth that reached from either extremity of 2 ears, which peeped forth from under a profusion of matted locks of lusterless blackness. But instead of being, like, absolutely terrified by this thing, he was just like, "Yo, do you wanna go race me?" And the guy was just like, "Yeah, like, I would love to go race you. I've been waiting on somebody to race me for a very long time." And so they go off and race. I don't know who won, but at the end of it, the Headless Horseman is just like, "Hey, like, if you need any supernatural assistance in future races, let me know."
Fantastic.
Right? I love that story. That's so fun.
So, next step in her Dullahan era is to randomly challenge people to horse races.
God, yeah, I think I was, like, meant to be one.
Yeah, well, I mean, Andrew's the Squonk, you're the Dullahan. That makes sense.
It does. What are you, though, Sean?
Head of scholarly research.
See,
I'm sorry, you're right. That is your title.
I am dedicated to my job. I am very efficient at it. I am saying all this with a straight face so that Andrew doesn't edit it later.
I thought you were editing this episode.
I don't have the equipment. Then we are in a problem. Because I don't have any editing experience or equipment. Unless it's
So
right.
the rest of what I've really got on this thing are stories. Do you guys have anything else?
Now, one thing you haven't brought up, Ash, you mentioned in the beginning that it was more of a harbinger, but a lot of the stories I found said that it would hunt people down and kill them. Like it was an inescapable fate, not just a harbinger.
Yeah. And I wonder if those stories really started kind of coming about because of the popularity, like, because that Disney movie really is aimed for kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if it's a lot more of an increase from the popularity of that to introduce stories of it killing. Because, I mean, like, a lot of these are just hearsay that just kind of like increases over time as is. So I'm
It
just
would.
kind of curious, like, the stories that you found, like, when are they allegedly, like, dated?
I didn't have any of the information, but they felt newer than the 1800s. I want to say like 1980s, 1990s.
Yeah.
Now, it would also make sense that it would need the ability to break in and move through barriers if it was a relentless killer. That would make those abilities make sense. As if it got those. Oh, it's unlike your old ones where it would just appear. Or, so it is interesting to see how much of this is the original Dullahan and how much has been inspired by other headless horsemen over the centuries.
Yeah. Like, especially like what we were talking about earlier with like Irving kind of like adding additions from like the real stories and then from also like the real things like yeah, like the Hessian. And so like the continuous like adding of elements has probably really changed this thing from like the initial, so it could be like we have the American version of it, the Arabic version of it, which I didn't really look into it too much. I didn't look into uh the Arabic version or the Kion. I can't really pronounce it, but I don't know if you guys saw anything about the Kion.
No, that sounds interesting though.
Yeah, I like from what I've seen, it's just like another name for it. And I mean, like I also have like other like fictitious stories. Most of the ones that I've found have just been like kind of fictitious stories and like kind of just I don't know, like fun little fairy tales of sort. Like I have another one called The Harvest Dinner where uh the protagonist is initially following fairies that are dressed in green hunting frock with little red caps and the main character Patty follows them to the church and ends up seeing a coach and six figures come out of the moat that headed towards him, and neither the horse nor the people inside the coach had a head. So I think that's fun that it just likes to go and hang out with all these other things like the fairies and the banshees.
I mean, wouldn't you? If you could hang out with things that weren't human, would you spend your time hanging out with
Yeah.
humans?
Absolutely.
Oh,
Oh, and then there's other accounts where they're seen bowling with their own skulls.
that's fantastic.
Right. Because like in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, in the book, there's like the headless haunt that comes around and uh they're all depicted like doing these things like showing off with their horses and like it kind of like depicts them as more like jovial creatures.
Yeah. Now, so I do have a question at you involving Harry Potter. You probably already know what I'm going to ask.
Mm-hmm.
So is nearly headless Nick Dullahan?
No, and that's why he's so bitter is because
He has a head.
why yeah, because he cannot participate in the activities of the headless haunt, so he cannot be accepted, even though he's nearly headless. He's so mad that people did not do a proper job in his execution, and he's just like stuck in death with like a tiny little bit of skin that he can't rip off.
See, I couldn't remember much, but I just remember him as a character.
Yeah,
he
he's not as prominent in the movies.
he literally has a flab of skin. The only thing connecting his head. That's why he's nearly headless.
Yeah, and honestly, I feel so bad for him because like the Headless Horseman slash the Dullahan slash whatever you want to call them, uh he invites them to his like death day party, like I think it's his 100th death day party, and hoping that he can like have some sway with them to like finally be invited into like the cool kids club, and they're just like, nope, suck a dick, dumb shits.
We're gonna show off all the things that you can't.
Yeah, basically, and then they just proceed to be like, look at me juggling with my head, look at me playing pool with my head, ha ha ha, don't you suck.
That's exactly how that went. That was word for word from the books.
Yes. Hire me for the new HBO show, please.
Actually,
Thank you again, our ghosts and goblins, for listening to the Night Skulls. You all be good to each other. Don't answer the scratching at your window.
Or do.
But most importantly, stay safe out there.
Good night.